Sailors of Reddit, what is one of the strangest things you've seen at sea? A dolphin swimming with a sponge in his mouth. The crew member I was with asked if I knew why the dolphin has a sponge in his mouth. I didn't know. Of course. He said because dolphins have no hands. It's hilarious when you're looking at something clearly no one has ever seen before and someone asks you what is going on and you don't know. Like we all just saw it. No one currently here can explain it. We all just stand here in dumbfound together. I think some people expect that David Attenborough will jump out any second now to explain everything to them. The first time you see a large sea turtle is kinda strange, they look like floating boulders. But the sea, for as strange as it is an amazing place as well. Seeing a flying fish or looking in the water and seeing fish as far as you can see is incredible. I saw this quote on one of these once. The sea gives and takes in equal measure. I worked on a cage diving boat off South Africa. I saw plenty of incredible things. But one day we had a 5+ meter female white shark come up next to the boat. She was completely uninterested in the cage, the chum, or the bait lines, but just kept hanging around, checking us out. The size of her was just incredible. Every time she came back to the surface, my brain would refuse to process what I was seeing for a second. Like, what is that? Jesus. It's huge. She was so calm and curious. For me, it was the first time that I had a clear understanding that there's some kind of intelligence going on in that brain, even if it's completely alien. I was out sailing alone and a couple of huge ocean sunfish came up next to my boat. They are so derpy. But the size of those things up close is pretty shocking. The size of a lot of things is pretty shocking when you get closer to them than you normally would be. Traffic signs and livestock are good examples. I'm not a sailor, but one time I went on a glass bottom boat tour. The captain accidentally went the wrong way to come back in and took us out to sea. There were maybe 60 people staring down through the glass bottom in a 3-foot swells. Didn't take long before people starting throwing up. I'd say about 40 people puked on the glass. It was a nightmare. Bath sloshing around. Everyone moaning. Kids crying. Women screaming. It was effing terrifying and disgusting. It was traumatic. I'll always remember that. Not a sailor, but similar story. When I was younger, maybe high school, I went with a bunch of friends to Florida for vacation. We wanted to do something one day and there was like 15 of us, so we decided to take one of this big ass deep sea fishing charters. There were tons of people on this boat, so major touristy BS. All of the girls we were with started to feel sick about an hour into the boat trip, so they went down a level to this room where they had tables and a drink stand and shit. We went due to check on them later and this place was an absolute hellhole of like 50 people throwing up everywhere and crying and shit. The smell of that mixed in with the fish and stuff was like death. Nothing outstanding happened on the boat ride, so I was just amazed that this was what the workers dealt with all day every day. Never getting on one of those again. I wouldn't say strange. More just amazing and pretty rare. I saw the green flash one morning while on watch somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea. Sea was smooth as glass. Sky was gorgeous. I was on the bridge wing drinking my coffee and having a smoke just before sunrise, and I happened to be looking at the right spot at the right time as the sun crested the horizon. The smallest brightest flash of green, and then the sun started climbing. Was out boating one day and a harbor seal flops up onto my boat, which was moving at the time, albeit not particularly fast, and displays absolutely no interest in getting off. At first I thought he just didn't want to jump off a moving boat, so I slowed right down. But he still stayed put. Then I thought he was disoriented or something and I got down towards the stern to shoo him away. It was then that I noticed that I was being tailed by a pod of orcas, which was presumably the reason why my new guest had made himself at home on my boat. They encircled the boat and stayed there for 30 minutes, which was both amazing, closest I'd ever been to an orca by far, never mind a whole pod of them, and somewhat terrifying. The boat I was on was a 20-footer, so reasonably sized, but not so large that I liked my chances of not capsizing if the orcas decided they really wanted their dinner. They eventually lost interest and moved on. The seal hopped off and swam away in the other direction a few minutes later. I've always sailed around Europe, so the first time I came into waters where flying fish are a thing was a trip. I thought I'd seen flying fish before, but it turns out those were just jumping fish. Flying fish really do skim over the water really long distances. They're magical. And overnight some of the dumbasses end up on your deck and then die there. That's kinda sad. I was surprised the first time I ever saw it myself. But the time I was on a scuba diving boat and a lady saw them. She yelled out, "Wait. Flying fish are real? Hilarious." Planes flying 100 feet above sea level throwing bales out of the side door into the ocean. Yes, it was off the coast of Miami. Yes, I got the FCK out of there. Yes, it was in the past 5 years. The trade is still alive and well down there. Edit. Not hey. I grew up a ranch kid and was thoroughly perplexed as to why anyone would be tossing hay bales into the ocean. Somehow, drugs make more sense. Left my sailboat anchored off the coast of Saturna Island. Go visit friends. Spend the night on land. Next day, on my way back, as I'm rowing and getting closer to my boat, I can swear there is a sound coming from my boat. Some sort of small commotion is happening. As I go up my ladder, in ninja mode, I'm trying to figure out WTF. I see 2 otters laying in a bed of fish carcasses. Fucking on my deck. They haven't noticed me yet, and so I do the polite thing and cough a bit. That was not the best idea, as they freaked out when they saw me, starting panicking and ensuring that the fish guts would get absolutely everywhere in my navigation tools and seats. There was no real damage, but I'll never forget the sound of otters fucking. I was in a cruise boat and we were chugging along the very busy waterways of Shanghai, approaching the area where the Huangpu River joins the Yangtze. The waterway is colossal and one of the busiest shipping routes, with traffic heading in all directions, which creates a lot of large swells. I looked over the edge and down about 50 feet away, and there is a man. He was sitting precariously cross-legged paddling along on a door. I used to be in the Navy, and out in the middle of the ocean at night can be calming and odd at the same time. One night, I recall the sea was incredibly flat and calm, even out 1,000 miles from shore. The sky was clear and you could see every star in the sky. The really neat, creepy, and vertigo-inducing thing was the stars reflected in the water, and it looked like I was standing inside of a sphere of stars. It really was incredible, but it actually made me a bit dizzy because of the rocking of the ship and the feeling of not really knowing which way was up. Found this odd if not strange when I started sailing. On ships we can have days which are more or less than 24 hours. On multi-day voyages clocks are advanced as we travel east and retarded as we travel west to adjust with local time. The wall clock in our cabins were analog, but the advancement or retardation was automated by some mechanism. For an hour of retardation, the minute hand would smoothly glide anti-clockwise a full circle. This was usually done at midnight. Kinda looked spooky if you were awake. Got roped into sea trials for an aircraft carrier several years back when I worked for Huntington Ingalls. Couldn't sleep one night and decided to go up to the flat top in the middle of the night to get some fresh air. It was eerily quiet and the water had this odd obsidian black mirror sheen. Kinda hypnotic. Dunno how long I stood there, but apparently it was long enough to warrant a roving watch to get my attention and escort me back below. Got chewed out by my supervisor the following morning when he found out. Turns out a lot of civvies and sailors over the years have fallen into the sea at night. A unicorn pool toy. It was really big in the middle of nowhere. The only thing you could see was the toy and an island almost 20 minutes away. Deleted. I thought I was the only one with a space whale tat. Mine is probably much nerdier though. Probably a dolphin or something. A good friend of mine captains a beautiful sport fish boat for his boss. Spends its winters in Florida and summers in New York. I usually fly down in the spring to FL to give a hand running it back north, and we always have a ton of fun and fish on the way. One night on the journey we decide to keep steaming through the night to get to a spot we wanted to fish at first light the next morning. Probably 100 miles offshore, so there's basically nobody around. Little about the boat. Absolute beast. Radar. AIS for ship tracking and info from other craft with AIS. Night vision camera. Depth sounders. Literally every gadget to keep you safe even on the darkest of nights. So we're cruising along in absolute pitch black night. Just cruising 12-15 knots with every electronic on. Now, if you've never been offshore at night, you don't know true black night. There's nothing. Like nothing. Spotlights. LED panels. You can see the waves a few feet in front of the boat and that's it. We always have at least 2 guys up. One on the wheel and one keeping an eye on the electronics. So, somewhere off the Carolinas, we pick something up on radar. Definitely a large boat. We had the range at like 10 miles on the machine. So we should definitely see this thing by now. A guy could light up a smoke 5 miles away and you'll see the lighter, that dark. But nothing. No AIS readout on it, so it's not broadcasting its info. We keep getting closer and closer. Miles counting down. Blip getting bigger on the radar screen. Still. Nothing. Now we're within a mile of this thing, whatever the F it could possibly be, and we have all eyes up top. Literally out of the most insane darkness is this broadside F-King Navy ship. Absolutely massive. Not a single light on. Not a single person out on any of the decks. Just there. Floating. It creeped me so far the FCK out. That made a shiver run up my spine. And I'm wrapped in a blanket in my well-lit apartment. Can I ask where in Florida your friend lives? My dad is a marine mechanic captain. And as a side job captains for a dude and sails his boat between Florida and New York every year. Doubt your friend is my dad. But too big of a coincidence not to ask. Not a sailor per se, but I spent a couple of years recreationally sailing in the Gulf of Mexico. I rarely spent the night out on the boat, but was out almost every day. I was out one evening with a friend who was visiting. I want to say it was between 10 PM to 11 PM and the boat started violently rocking back and forth for a few seconds. Even though waters were pretty calm. We can't really see much, but we saw these 3 really dark and large shapes swim underneath the boat. Scared the sweet Jesus out of us. We definitely felt for a second that we were going to capsize and then likely die. When you say large, how large are we talking? A 6 or 7 feet? Or 15 feet plus? I saw one of those in Laguna Beach, California one winter. Was walking on the walk up on the bluff and drinking coffee, and there is this disturbance in the water. It was a line of hundreds of dolphins hauling ass and jumping out of the water. It was incredible. Trying to look this up online, but I only see clickbaits. Do you have a video of a real rogue wave? It sounds really scary and impressive at the same time. I've read about Chinese fishing boats, which capture sharks, cut just the fin off for shark fin soup, and toss the rest of the carcass back. I wonder if it's something like that. A woman. This spring I got to see bioluminescence and it was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. My brother and I once found a giant block of hard foam. It must have been at least 20x20 and was deep into the water. Was on an offshore drilling rig about 100 miles out in Gulf of Mexico. We had a bad winter storm come through. And the next morning there were thousands of small land birds sitting exhausted on the helipad. Some died there. Most just sat. All of them had been blown from shore and had been fighting the storm for hours. It was sad. Green flash. At sunset Flarkeys. And X200B. Seen the sunset hundreds of times. Green flash 2x. A 20+ foot whale shark while fishing in an 18 feet boat. Scared the ever-loving crap out of the 4 of us in the boat. Of course it was totally harmless. Unless it accidentally flipped us. The coolest thing was a 10 feet manta ray jumping about 15 feet out of the water and seeming to actually fly. A school of 8 feet tarpon swimming in a circle right above us while diving was one of the most beautiful. I have a cousin who got a dishonorable discharge for shooting a shark on the deck, if you'd like to hear the story. I was out on the weather decks in the dead of a moonless night on the Persian Gulf in springtime. If you have never been there, the water can look like a sheet of glass on calm windless days. The currents even seem calm, but there is this turbulent flow that can happen which creates these great circles in the water just barely visible to a trained eye. At night the water on the outside of the circles is moving more than on the inside, and there are photoluminescent bacteria that light up in the agitated areas. The effect looks like giant glowing circles in the water that doesn't seem real at all. It is a very close approximation to those psychedelic neon abstract artworks you might see in Spencer's gift shop. That for sure was one of the stranger things I've seen staring into the void. Normally cuss up a storm and then go report for muster. My dad was in the Navy and spent 2 years on a submarine when he was really young. He told me about how he would see flying fish and dolphins and stuff. But the thing that fascinated me the most, that I really want to see with my own eyes, was bioluminescent plankton. He described it as if the ocean beating against the boat looked like fire. My mum's friend got lost at sea after her boat was hit by a storm. She was out there for days until she was saved by a ship that was close enough for her to use her only flare to signal them. She now believes in crystals. I don't have an answer, but upvote this guy's post. I want it on the front page. A mola, ocean sunfish. I thought it was dead. But apparently they're experts when it comes to uselessly flapping around on the surface of the water. Worked for a couple months as lifeguard. There are people actually pooping in the sea. Had to clean it 3 times in a week once.